applauding all of you for attending today on a Sunday. I'm applauding, I feel like I'm a little hot on the audio all of a sudden. I don't know if somebody can help us with that. I'm applauding MAC. MAC resides right here, my lower left pelvis. MAC is an acronym. Let me see how we can do this a little bit better. We can get this a little bit through. Oh, good. Thank you. MAC is an acronym. Thank you very much. For Melissa's amazing kidney. I'm applauding Melissa for giving me one of her kidneys and changing my life, allowing me to optimize the rest of my years. I'm applauding when I hear anyone talking about the gift that allows someone to live their best life possible. I applaud that even though I know you're talking about me, because I know there are other people in this room. And those of us who have received the gift are in awe of this platform we stand on. We're in awe of this privilege to not only live our best life possible, but for many of us, those of you that are engaged with this association and might be mentoring other individuals through your support groups, are passing it on, are paying it forward by helping other people get the opportunity. And that's what today is really all about. But you might say, well, those are lucky people. You know, I think, again, how lucky is she, those that, or he, those that receive a transplant? But it's really not about luck. And I will tell you, and I think a number of people in this room will tell you, it isn't about luck. I think we feel very blessed. But as you will see through this program, it's about being prepared. It's not about, I'm luckier than you, or she's luckier than this other person. It's about being prepared. And as Elmer Letterman once said, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Think about that for a moment. Preparation meeting opportunity. That's what we're going to be talking about this afternoon. Preparation meeting opportunity. But where are we today? Where do you stand today? And where are you headed? Now, some demographics were taken during the introduction. So I got sort of a feel, I think you all have a feel for who's in the room. But let me ask just a slight shift on some of those questions and maybe underscore so that I can see a show of hands. For instance, how many of you are waitlisted for a transplant right now? Show of hands. Okay. And keep your hands raised if you've been waitlisted longer than a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, 8 years.
7.5.
7.5, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
7.5 years. And you are on dialysis?
Yes.
And so, as you will see as we go through this program, that a number of us and the demographics of the room, in terms of the information that I'll be sharing, will be affected and impacted in different ways. In fact, some of you may even feel a little uncomfortable with some of the information I'll be sharing because you've been on dialysis or you're on dialysis and you feel ignored. You're on dialysis or you're trying to avoid dialysis. I was able to bypass dialysis. How many of you are in early stages of your disease or early enough that you hope to bypass dialysis? When you need a transplant, you're going to go for transplant, correct? Show of hands again. Hoping for a preemptive transplant, right? So we all stand in different levels and in different platforms of our disease continuum. Yet the information I'll be sharing with you today will apply to most of you at these various levels. Some of you might say to yourself, been there, done that, already gone through that, I'm over here now. But I believe each and every one of you will be able to take some pearls home with you, and this is what my hope is. Because as hopeful transplant recipients and proactive CKD patients, this is our goal. Our goal is to take where we are right now, take a more laser-beamed focus on where you want to be. How many of you actually looked at your future and then rolled the tape back and said, okay, if that's my future, I want, and if I have options, what can I do to direct that future. We feel like we're out of control because we have this disease, but there are things that you can do. How many of you have actually set a plan in place for, especially the individuals that are doing quite well, hoping to avoid dialysis? You're not at the stage where you need to get on dialysis. Do you have a plan? Have you discussed that plan with your physicians and your healthcare team? Excellent. And that's being proactive. So isn't it interesting how 3 letters, an acronym, GFR, can rule our life? 3 little letters. And isn't it interesting that when we're in the green zone, when we're above 60 on our labs, we're feeling pretty good. You don't really have to pay attention to some of this stuff. But as our function declines, and as we start approaching, as our tank starts to approach empty, things change for us. Now, many of you are probably familiar with these stages, but let me review them quickly for you. The end-stage renal disease tiers, stage 1 through 5, right? So you have over 90, 60 to 89, 30 to 59. These are your GFR numbers. But it's not really until we get to stage 4 that, as patients, I'll speak for myself and many of the individuals that I mentor and coach, that we start saying, hey, this is time, I better start paying attention to this. Or, like myself, where I would approach my nephrologist and say, hey, I'm getting a little concerned about this. Don't we need to start having the conversation? And there was a lot of pushback. We'll talk about that as we move through the program. There was a lot of pushback. And if you are not being your own best advocate, you go, okay, it's not time. It's kind of nice when your doctor says you don't need to do anything, right? But in this case, we're going to flip that. We're going to flip that concept of good news, or no news is good news. No action is good news. Because action will keep you in the driver's seat. Action will keep you focused and proactively working towards that best outcome. But isn't it also interesting that we have to wait till we get to stage 4 before information is disseminated in those offices? I had to ask for that education, in-office education. I was told it was too early, but I said I didn't care, and I still wanted to learn what I needed to learn about dialysis and transplant. I thought I knew it all, but I didn't. I thought I knew it all because the year I was born, my dad was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease. Of course, I was told the story because I was just being birthed that year, right? So the year I was born, my dad was told not only that he had PKD, but that he had 20 years to live. In my early 20s, I was diagnosed with the same disease that took my dad's life in his early 40s. So yeah, I didn't feel very lucky. But it really is about wanting and willing your life to be the best that it can be. If any of you have ever contemplated surrendering to the whatever, higher power, or just the words of wisdom that are coming out of your nephrologist's offices, I ask you to also be partnering with your healthcare providers. I don't want you to end up in stage 5 and be listening to somebody else's crystal ball. You have lots of time. You don't need to know this right now. Well, why shouldn't we know it when we're not in a state of urgency? Why shouldn't it? Why should this information be relayed to us? Why do we have to wait till we get sicker to learn more? Why? Because, well, I'll give you one reason why, and we'll talk about this in more detail as we move through the program, but Medicare doesn't cover in-office patient education until you are in stage 4. But being a proactive individual, I kind of wanted to know what my cards were. I wanted to know what my hand was. I wanted to know how to play my hand. And I also discovered this amazing opportunity, if I was proactive, that I could literally bypass dialysis. And I can do it in such a way that I wasn't in a state of urgency and that I wasn't putting my life at risk. Only because I sought information. And that's what you're doing here by attending these meetings. This group is a phenomenal group. I have to tell you, the groups that I have had speaking engagements with throughout the years post-transplant, This is a phenomenal group. You are being exposed to some incredible information, and I know you know that because you show up on a Sunday. And I don't think it's just about the food, but it sure does look good back there. I know that you know this because you've got some incredible people running this program, and I thank them for the privilege of this platform here today. And I know that you sense this because you're making your health, your future, and the educational process about your future important enough to show up and learn. It's pretty easy just to dig your head in the sand, say, well, I don't need to know anything right now until I have, hey, we don't feel sick, right? But if I'm going by somebody else's crystal ball, you have lots of time. How do they know that? I mean, yeah, sure, we have some charts. We can look at the trajectory of individuals that have the same type of health profile. But I don't necessarily think that that's let me see if I can fix this a little bit. That's the answer to planning your best future or your best life. So the best thing you could do is visualize your future. Those of you that have done it, bravo. Visualize your future, know your options, and start processing how would it be to live in that world. What would it be like to be on dialysis? What would it be like to have a transplant? What would it be like to wait on a wait list for 8 years while I'm on dialysis? Is that my ideal choice? Is that the ideal outcome that I can create for myself? I think you'll find again as we move forward there are some differences there, and you'll learn if you've not received some of this information already. It'll underscore the importance when we look at the difference between dialysis and transplant. Now, dialysis, please don't get me wrong, dialysis is a wonderful option if you can't have a transplant. Some of you may be in this room that are...
That's right.
Right? Thank you. You got it. Absolutely. And if we didn't have dialysis and we couldn't have a transplant, where would we be?
That's right.
You got it? So I'm with you on that. Yes, I'm so blessed, I feel, that I was able to avoid it, but not everybody can.
That's right.
And not everybody can initially, and maybe they have to wait until their health gets to a point or their profile gets to a point. And transplant isn't necessarily a walk in the park either. We'll talk a little bit about that too, but for me,
right.
I've got my person in the back. You got it. So I think we're on the same page. I don't want anyone to feel in this room that if you're on dialysis and you think that you'll never get a transplant, hopefully I'll give you some tips today and some pearls that you can take back with you that will help you create or actualize that future, at least get you involved in some activities that will allow you to do that. If you would just look for a moment, imagine your side view mirror of your car. Imagine that for a moment. And you know how that sign is. It says that things are further away than they appear, right? The vehicles, whenever you think, oh, I didn't realize I was that close. But now I want you to think about if you are in earlier stages of this disease continuum, that renal failure may be closer than it appears. I had to think that way to be proactive. Otherwise, I could just lead myself down a path of waiting to get sicker. I had to think that way, and I'm asking those of you that are being proactive to continue to think that way. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just trying to wake you up. I want you to think differently. I want you to think differently than perhaps your physician saying, don't worry. At least that's what I was told many of the people that I mentor and I coach and I meet at meetings like this. That I've asked my doctor if I could be evaluated for transplant. He said, no, it's too early. I've asked my doctor, what about the discussion of transplant instead of vein mapping? Oh, you've got lots of time. We don't need to do that yet. You can't go to the transplant center yet. There are some things that you can do, and you just need to be persistent, respectful, persistent, and diligent. Otherwise, you'll be sleepwalking your way to dialysis. See, without this perspective, without seeing that it may be closer than it appears, without thinking that I can be a little bit more prepared, then you end up getting yourself into a situation where you feel that there's no way out. And that you've lost time because you look behind, you go, oh my gosh, all the things I could have been doing. So I think, in addition to CKD, that we also can self-diagnose and claim to be CA, which is chronic aimlessness, right? That we're aimlessly walking around waiting to get sicker, I guess, so that we can be triggered to do something else. And this is what I'm hoping you won't do. So here's a news flash. Even though you feel there's nothing you can do right now, there is something you can do. The first thing you can do is stop procrastinating. You could say, all right, even if, again, you're on dialysis, and you're waiting for a transplant, or you're waiting for a deceased donor, maybe I should change my thinking. Maybe I should consider living kidney donation. Maybe I could take myself off the list and give someone else my place in line. Now, that's a pretty cool concept. Huh. Easier said than done, right? Much easier said than done. But there is something you can do. Being here is a great start. Knowing that it's going to take, this is no walk in the park, it's going to take everything you've got. You need to dig in deep, and you need to say, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to live my best life possible. That's how determined, you need to be, and that's the resolve you need to have. Because finding a living kidney donor and bypassing dialysis or taking yourself off dialysis sooner rather than later through the gift from a living donor will lead you to better outcomes, statistically. Now, there are people, perhaps even in this room, that have been on dialysis for years and years and choose to stay on there. That's their choice. It's not even a matter of being ineligible for transplant. That's their preference. And that's perfectly fine. We all have different preferences. I don't want anybody to feel bad about that. This is about your personal preference. But you do need to know the facts. How could my life change if I wasn't on dialysis? You'll hear from a few people on our panel that will talk about their life on dialysis. We may hear from a few other people here. Also, life on transplant. You're immunosuppressed. You have a higher risk of infection, of contracting anything, especially on an airplane or in a public place, because your immune system is immunosuppressed. And you do live your life, perhaps a little more, I do anyway, a little more cautiously. But I ask you to dig deep, know that this is an inside job. If you're willing to take this journey here today and beyond when you walk out this door, know that you have to come to grips with your situation. You have to come to grips with your disease at this point in time, wherever you are, pre-transplant, pre-dialysis, or on dialysis, hoping for a transplant, trying to avoid dialysis. Wherever you are, come to grips with your situation and the trajectory of your disease. Have a talk with your inner critic, who might be staring back at you in the mirror going, you could never do this. No one's ever going to offer to give you a kidney.
Mirror.
What was that?
I said I have to get a new mirror.
Got to get a new mirror. Mirror on the wall. Got to get a new mirror. Yeah, you need to just check in with yourself and say, really, seriously, is this the way I want to plan for my life? I think I'm going to need to take this little guy off, aren't I? Hold on. Speakers undressing. No, just an area. Catch that on tape. Give me 1 second, and you won't have to hear that clicking. You were hearing that clicking, weren't you? No?
It was okay.
It was okay?
Yes.
You could hear it ticking.
Well, rather be safe than sorry. I'll not forget my hearing though there. Try that. You didn't even hear it. I should have asked. Okay. Proactive. There you go. To a fault, right? As long as I don't take anything else off, we're good. Okay, and this process isn't for everyone. We kind of chatted about that, right? It's not for everyone. So it's okay if some of you are scared. Can I tell you the number of times that I was either in the waiting room, in the exam room, or in my car following my appointments, crying? Can I tell you? I can confess. I did. And what was it all about? Numbers. Numbers on my labs. So I learned how to get my labs early. Step one. I thought, I've got to have this experience on my own. This is silliness. I'm an adult. I'm a professional. I own businesses. This is crazy. But I don't know if it would take my mind back to when my dad was struggling and when he died. I don't know if it took me back to what I thought my life might be if I followed in his footsteps. I'm not sure where it took me, but it sure took me to a dark place, and I needed to snap out of that. So I learned how to get my labs in advance, and I have a little pep talk with myself and go, okay, Risa, your numbers are this today. But the truth is I needed to get to, I wanted to live my best life possible, right? So the truth is I needed to come to grips with where I was and where I was going. I had to take my rose-colored glasses off. I'm, eternal optimist as well, but I had to get real, and that's what we need to do. We need to get real with this process. So it's okay to be scared, because fear invites courage, and courage invites or leads to bravery. So those who seek their best life possible, it is possible if somebody like me, a little scaredy cat, could become courageous enough not only to meet or exceed my goals, but to also take that information and share it now with you. Anyone can do this, because I imagine many of you are not getting as emotionally distraught about this process. And maybe you're in the, listen, I don't need to worry about this anymore. I'm in the shower, thanks. It's a journey to get from point A to point B. You have to be patient. You have to have the determination and the will to take yourself through those steps. And I'm going to give you a warning, a course warning, that this course may make you feel uncomfortable. I mentioned it once. I'll mention it at least a couple more times, if not this second time. Oh, someone's talking. They were asking me a question. And I want you to know that it's okay to be uncomfortable. And why is it okay to be uncomfortable? Because I think that we have to get uncomfortable to push through. You almost need to, what I call, break down to break through. So emotionally, it's okay if some of you are, I don't know where's she going with this information. It's okay. Look at Mark Twain. I loved one of his quotes. I was seldom able to see an opportunity until it had ceased to be one. Isn't that true? I mean, it's like, oh, shoulda, coulda, oh, regret. A lot of the mentees and my coaching clients that I talk to is like, oh, I wish I would have. Because the clock's ticking, right? The clock is ticking, and while you have the time to do your due diligence, now is the time to do it. Even if you think, oh, I've already missed the opportunity, what other opportunity is out there? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Take a look at, okay, well, I missed that, but can I circle back? Is there a workaround? Is there a recapture? I may have lost some years or months or whatever it may have been, but what can I do to get myself to an area where I can push forward and achieve a better outcome? Really, this is what it's all about, the outcome. So the main goal is to optimize your choices, and the key objective is to trigger your best options when they still count. So those of you that are optimistic about getting a transplant before the need for dialysis, or getting off dialysis sooner rather than later, so that you can get a transplant, timing is everything. So if you're seeing your doctor and they're going, okay, here's your numbers, everything's good, we'll see you in 3 months, bye. You need to become more accountable. You need to start speaking up for yourself. You need to become your own best advocate. You need to start having these dialogues. What does it mean if? How can I achieve this? And honestly, I will tell you it's going to be a struggle because your doctors don't have the time to have these dialogues with you. They've got too many patients waiting down the hall and in that waiting room to deal with these extra things and talking about the human spirit and the heart and my future, my life. But if you're really, really lucky and you come to meetings like this and you prepare your script, and the minute your doctor walks in the door, you say, I've got some questions for you. And you run the meeting. I mean, I trained my nephrologist, and I say this with kindness and all due respect. He used to come into the room and just say, okay, what you got? You just sit down. Well, I just noticed on my lab, and I think, and this is what I'd like to do, and what are your thoughts on that? I was always respectful. I didn't step on toes. I wanted to make sure that he didn't think I was playing doctor from Google. Because we get on, Internet MD. It's real easy to do that. Well, I read, and so I just tried never to put him on the defense. But I still had to push it, and I still got pushed back. So tick-tock, tick-tock, what do you need to do? Become a truth seeker like I did. Make sure you're getting underneath all those layers. Okay, I understand there are different types of dialysis. I understand, this whole underscore push for fistula first. I get that campaign. But why isn't anybody talking about transplant first? This happens to be the name of my organization, Transplant First Academy, because I thought, why is there just fistula first? I thought we were being discriminated against. If you go into any kidney patient education materials, you'll find, 132 pages on dialysis. And at the last page or two, there's something about transplant. But why are we talking dialysis before transplant? Even if I was not eligible, or optimize your remaining years is probably the best way to put it. How can you optimize your remaining years? So let's just take a quick poll in the room between dialysis and transplant. What are your opinions about and I shouldn't even say opinions, what are some facts that you're comfortable sharing in terms of your knowledge, the difference between dialysis and transplant? How would you relate the two from either a pro or a con? Dialysis versus transplant. What do you think you get out of transplant that you can't get on dialysis?
Time.
Time? Freedom.
Right. I think better health is.
Better health. Interesting.
May I add?
Yes, please.
I had 3 relatives died of a heart attack while on dialysis. I think I was not scared to go on dialysis. I cried every time for about 3 months.
Did you all hear that? So she had 3 relatives that had 3 relatives?
1 brother and cousins.
And all 3 had heart attacks on dialysis. While on dialysis, and she said, do you think I wasn't afraid to get on dialysis? She also had mentioned to me as we were preparing to start our program that she feels like she's been forgotten. She's on dialysis and just forgotten. She's never been referred for transplant. No one's talked to her about it, which there is now a mandate.
I requested, and I feel I'm being ignored. And no one mentions it back. And they, we'll tell the doctor, but no one, including the one that I started with.
And this is why you need to take a stand and become your own best advocate and connect with an end-stage renal disease network. Is it Network 17 or 17? And your organization will connect you for sure if we don't talk before the end of the program. So we've heard a few things. Anything else that you want to add to that between the difference between dialysis and transplant?
Cost.
Cost.
Convenience.
Convenience. Okay, so are we saying cost, that it's less cost for transplant than dialysis?
No.
Yes.
Oh, it's
Yes.
true, it is less transplant. Shocking, right?
Well, you pay for your own medications.
Well, out of your own pocket.
Free of pain. Free of pain.
Free of pain, that's going to be transplant versus.
No, the needles.
Right. So you're saying you're free of pain, not being on. Of somebody sticking yourself. Well, let's just look at without getting too sidetracked here. Let's look at our graph. If you're following around, it's along in your handout. So the difference between dialysis and transplant, when you're on dialysis, the reason you feel like a bowl of spaghetti is because you're getting 10 to 13% of function while you're on dialysis. Now, you may be getting more if you're doing more frequent visits or nocturnal, and depending on how often you're having dialysis treatments. But when you're on transplant, if your labs aren't showing over 60, there's probably something up, and you got to check on what's up to find out what's happening with that functioning kidney. So you can see there's a huge difference in the way you're going to feel because again, with transplant you have a functioning kidney inside your body 24/7 doing what a kidney should do 24/7. On dialysis you're only getting the 10 to 13%, and that's why it just can kind of, as a number of individuals have told me since I've not been on dialysis, that you would even mention it this morning, that or before the program, that you feel exhausted, right?
I feel like a rag.
A rag. Yeah. Well, and after transplant surgery, you might feel like a rag too. It's a big surgery. Some of the medications you take may have, a period of time where you have to adjust. But let's look at what else we have here. Time demands, you mentioned. How about diet restrictions? You can say goodbye to most, depending on, I know you might be diabetic and transplant recipient, so there's still things but for the most part, you don't have no fluid, you're not watching your phosphates. There's just so many things that, you taste of life, living your best life, or you're tasting your best life as well. You're untethered, the exhausted infection, right? And then immunosuppression drugs, which we mentioned as well, increasing that risk for cancer and infections. It's a real risk. I'm just real careful. I live in Arizona, and you should see me when I'm running around town. Big old hat, big sun gear. I mean, I might as well have an umbrella. People laugh at me. It's dry as a bone, right? Actually, we just had some rain. But, yeah, you just have to protect yourself. So I know there's probably a number of people in this room that have had issues with skin cancer, for example, and so I'm just very, very careful. But the survival rates, as I mentioned, and we'll just look at this graph here, and I don't expect you to memorize this or even dissect it much, but you have a longer life expectancy on transplant, so much so that it's about 3 times longer when you look at, now this is coming out of US RDS, which is the United States Renal Data System. And according to their records and their data, that dialysis patients overall have an expected 6.2 years of remaining life. But I know dialysis patients that have been on dialysis for decades. I know transplant patients with deceased donors that are doing well decades after surgery. It should have been 10 to 12 years. What the data is showing in terms of what's being recorded, that it's about, and I say nearly 3 times, 17.2 years expected remaining life after transplant. I'll have that. I'll have what she's having. That's what I'll select if I can. And if I have to bridge to dialysis first, because that is a bridge until I can find my living kidney donor, until I'm blessed. And Terry, I know you're here somewhere, Terry, Terry's not here? No? I guess Terry's not here.
Terry's not here.
Oh, she's not, okay. Because she, in crazy good amount of time, received the call for a deceased donation kidney. It was like 3 months out of Davis. So that's pretty good stuff. Normally, as you know, it could be 8 years. And where are you registered? What center are you registered?
UCSF.
UCSF. Okay, I'm going to show you some stats on that. Might explain some of the reasons in terms of the number of people that are waiting at UCSF. And of course, the new allocation systems, we've got a whole bunch of stuff in there. So preemptive transplant, what are the benefits of avoiding dialysis beforehand? Best outcomes, less depression, more energy, less rejection, improved graft function. We've got an opportunity to be less likely to be fired, and you can retain your employment. Of course, you might have that time off during your transplant, but there's a less issue with managing a dialysis schedule, though I know probably a number of people here that are on dialysis have been able to retain their job. It's not easy. And a better quality of life. So we're all in for that. So why wouldn't you consider, if you could, for those of you that still have the choice, I know there are a number of people that still don't have this choice to get a transplant before the need for dialysis. But if you do have the choice, if I can focus on that for a good portion of this program, I want you to hear me loud and clear on some of these deterrents so that you can bypass these. Now, patients typically don't look at preemptive transplant, meaning transplant before the need for dialysis, because they're unaware before they start dialysis. No one's told them. They say it's about 27% of the population, the kidney disease population, that aren't aware of transplant before transplant before they had to get onto dialysis. And I think that number is actually a lot higher. You may not have been aware of transplant. If we take that question and we were asking you to take a survey and say, yeah, I really wasn't aware of transplant. But I think what the majority is not aware of is the risk-benefit ratio between transplant and dialysis, and the benefit of going directly to transplant and not being on dialysis if you have that opportunity to do that. So, you think it's a prerequisite. You view transplant as a challenge, not a choice. That's a biggie. Oh, wow, that's just overwhelming. Unimaginable task to have to ask somebody to be my donor, or wait in line in California, it's 9+ years. So, is that something you want to do? Fear of cancer, I've heard the stories. Being on immunosuppressants, those the immunomodular effects of immunosuppression. Haven't come to grips with my disease, that's why I'm just going to wait till I get sicker. I'm just going to do whatever my doctor says, but I'm going to wait I'm going to use every ounce of remaining function that I have left in my native kidneys before I go in for surgery or, dialysis, but we're talking about transplant here. And some physicians feel that you should use every ounce of remaining function. Or you think that you might be ineligible. Or you've been told, or you believe, that you couldn't afford it even if you were eligible. I'll give you a short list of why you may not be eligible. You have a recent cancer, active infections, active diseases, a smoker, I put the lid off here, alcohol abuse or use, maybe too much for the transplant center to approve, cognitive abilities may be questioned, can't afford the medication because that's the point I think you were making, that you have to prove that you could afford it, the medication, if by chance insurance changed for you. And your attitude or motivation. Do you have the attitude of, I don't really care about my life, I'm not really motivated, I do smoke, I drink, or I'm not really eating right, oh yeah, doc, I know I should be doing that. But these are not the patients your doctor's going to go, hey, let's talk about transplant. Because they're thinking, this person is not wanting to go down that path, they're not looking at living there. They don't desire their best life possible. They're in the gloom and doom. So if you think your doctor doesn't even have enough time to talk to you about getting, sitting down, knee to knee, eye to eye with you and saying, hey, let's have this conversation of transplant. How's it going to be if you're already feeling low about yourself? It's going to take that much more time to say, hey, well, let's look at something that could be more optimistic. Did you want to add to that?
About age. I'm 75 and my doc said dialysis was a better option because of my age.
Well, so the question is, what about age? My doctor's saying, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I'm 79 and I just had transplant 4 months ago.
Oh.
That's one of the best answers. You did a heck of a lot better than me saying anything. Eric, yes?
Do you know if some insurance companies discourage more than other insurance companies because of the cost?
Again, keep in mind that it is less costly to have a transplant than to be on dialysis.
Is it?
Yeah, it's usually about 3 years out, it breaks even, and then it's just the cost of medication. It's like $75,000 a year for a patient to be on dialysis. It's usually paid by Medicare. So the government stands and insurance companies stand to gain a lot by having their patients be transplanted. It is in their best interest to have you transplanted.
One more question. Do you have a question and answer period where we can ask questions?
We're going to have a panel, and I'll stick around, so if you have more questions, thank you. I know there was an announcement when I was introduced that you're to keep all your questions, but I want you to know that I invite, this is important, and you wouldn't have heard from your fellow CKD patient over here had you not answered or asked this question in the group. So I invite that dialogue. We can't really get into questions because we have to be mindful of time. I mean, technical or scientific questions. But by all means, if you have a comment about something I said, or if you're cheering me on from the back of the room, bring it on. Bring it on. We like that. Okay. Here's transplant deterrence by doctors. Oh, now I'll just add to that. To the gentleman who was asked, I'm too old. This is a great example, even if we didn't have this testimonial in the room, that I would get a second opinion. I mean, I would start by just going online, how old is too old. I will tell you a number of the centers where I've talked to them about age. Age is a number. How healthy are you? Age is a number. If you're healthy enough to have a transplant and all the other profile items are check that, okay, this is good, this is a go, this is a go, oh, he's 65, oh, I don't know, can't have a transplant. I mean, that's absurd. So you just need to find transplant centers that get that, and most of them get that, and that it's the nephrologist. And I will tell you as we go through this list, let's look at the doctor deterrence. They choose not to discuss because the projected trajectory leads them to believe that you're not eligible. They think that either it's of money or you're apathetic about your situation and you're just not a good candidate. They believe the patient should maximize residual function first, right? The tank should be on empty before you fill up. I don't agree. Confused about center evaluation, the listing criteria. I think your doctor may be confused about center criteria for evaluation. You can certainly call any center and ask them, I'd like to refer myself to your center. I'd like to have a transplant in your center. What is the age barrier? And I'll be shocked if they don't say, hey, it's a whole profile, buddy. It ain't about your age. Because you may be too old on paper and your health profile is not looking as positive to lend that to a transplant candidate position. Confused about center evaluation, right? Brain locked on fistula first. I feel like my nephrology office was brain locked on fistula first. No, we need to talk about the fistula. The doctor, I'm planning to do a transplant before dialysis. I know, and I remember once he even leaned forward to me and he said, do me a favor, they really give me a hard time when I don't get my patients into vein mapping. I said, well, what the heck? I'll go get a vein mapping. I might as well know what my veins look like and what arm's good. And of course the arm I thought would be good wasn't. Still some suspicion on the one that might be. But I did that, and the irony here is that I ended up getting a bill that says not paid by insurance. I had private insurance. Not paid by insurance. I ignored the bill, and all of a sudden the bill went away. You know how that happened. Do me a favor, they give me a hard time when I don't send my patients for vein mapping. I don't know. I guess it's a numbers thing. I used to be a consultant in the dental profession. I mean, I do recall to run a business, it is a numbers game, but you have to make sure it's balanced between heart and spirit and soul and doing the right thing. What about in the medical, what is it? No harm?
No harm.
Right. So if I just got the vein mapping and I got the call for the surgery even, I said, oh, no, I was just getting the vein mapping. Thank you very much. I'll call you. Don't call me. Don't want to scare or disappoint patients. Oh my gosh, I've heard this so many times. Don't want to scare or disappoint patients. Newsflash, doctors, nurses, anybody that believes this? We're already scared. Thank you very much. We're already scared. Did I tell you about how many times I broke down? Information is power.
Yes.
Information is power. I keep saying, what do you mean? Oh, I didn't want the patient to feel bad. What if they're not eligible? I didn't think they were eligible. I didn't really have the time. I didn't want someone to feel, well, it's too early. I never talk about transplant in stage 1, 2, 3, even 4. I'm questioning it. I think they would get closer to 5. What? Oh, I don't want to scare the patient. I don't want to depress them. They're already down. Hey, give me something to hope for. Right? Give me something that I can shoot for. Keep us productive. Now, there's a concept for you. Instead of sleepwalking our way to dialysis or staying on dialysis thinking, oh, I hope I get the call someday soon from a deceased donor. In this state, you better get ready to wait a long time. A real long time, unless you're really, really lucky and you're highly sensitized. We're all sensitive. But, yeah, you'd have to be rethinking this process. And I hope we can re-educate our doctors. They just don't have the time to get into this process, and that's what really positioned me to write the book, Shift Your Fate. We do have a few copies here today if you're wanting to take one home with you that not only talks about my story, but all the pearls that I'll be sharing with you today on how you can become more proactive, how you can engage with your doctors. Who's on dialysis and who's transplant eligible? 25% of those individuals that are on dialysis have never, or they're transplant eligible, but they've never been referred. And we've got one right here. And she's saying, well, maybe I'm just too old and they forgot about me. And again, age is a number. If all the other parts of the pieces of the puzzle will come together. This is a SRTR, which is a Scientific Registry of Transplant Recipients. And in California, about 25 transplant centers. And I just wanted to point out to you that as you look at these numbers, we've got California Pacific. Here's the number of living transplants that they performed, deceased transplants they performed, and the number of candidates. And I'm going to zoom down here to the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center. There's 5,225 patients waiting on that list with Joe, right? And you're in 8 years, right? They've done 257 living, 425 deceased. Interesting when I bring up Davis here. Look how many patients they have, 1232, quite a bit less than UCSF, and then 118, but of deceased they did 558. So maybe they just started a living program and they haven't been going as long. This, by the way, is a time frame of 7/11 to 12/13. So I just find this very interesting. So PMC, CPMC, right? And then we have Stanford, 85 living, 91 deceased. So we really got, again, the number of people waiting. This is the big kahuna here, is University of California, San Francisco. 1,600 at Stanford, 1,000 at, oh, that's LA, excuse me. So it's 19, almost 2,000. So you might want to be looking at this website and be checking to see which center should I possibly consider. I kind of liked convenience because I knew after transplant I'd have to be in for all those visits. But I gotta tell you, if it was gonna give me my best quality of life a little quicker, I could certainly find my way down the road if I needed to do that. Yes?
I'm sorry, I can't read. The chart's too small and your handout, I'm too far away from here. What's the CPMC?
Oh, CPMC? California Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco?
Yes.
Yeah, and what did you say?
What is the number?
The number, oh yes, this chart probably is quite small on the handout. The number of people waiting is 1972, but that's a snapshot of that period of time. I can't tell you what it is today, because they release these statistics. To me, I wish I could have fresh material for you. Yes?
Can you be evaluated at one center and transferred to another?
Yes. Can you be evaluated at one center and transferred to another? You can get evaluated at various centers, but it may not be in your best interest to be evaluated at several centers if they are in the same geographic area where they are pulling from the same pool. Some centers are, if you're looking at deceased. Yeah, if you're looking for a living kidney donor, by all means, you can just figure out what's going to be convenient for your living kidney donor and yourself. But yes, you can do that. And you go through have you been through, oh, obviously you haven't been through the evaluation because you were told you couldn't. So start with where you think you'd like to go. Interview them. See if you can, many transplant centers will allow you to self-refer. Hear me loud and clear on that. Self-refer. Your doctor doesn't necessarily have to be the gatekeeper here. I didn't know that. Because I was asking my doctor, please refer me, please refer me, please refer me. Not yet, too soon, not sick enough. And then I called over to Mayo Clinic, and I said, I'm really concerned about this. And they said, well, you can self-refer. I'm like, huh? You mean I could call and say, so I still played the smart, safe path. I went back to my doctor and asked them for that referral, and that took a while. But I will tell you, you do not have to wait. You do your research, you call the center, you become your own best advocate, you have that information, and you very politely go back to your doctor if need be and say, hey, I called over to the center and they're willing to take me. And if you want to send your paperwork, that's fine too, but they're willing to get to meet me at least to start the evaluation. Yes. One in the back, and then I'll get Linda. I think she wanted to add to that.
It sounds real nice that we'll just pack up our little bags and take our stuff over to the next people and they'll do the test. Except for when you're on Medicare and Medi-Cal and they put out all that money for all them tests in this one place, you're going to pay in the next. The next clinic that you go to from CPMC to Stanford, those tests all the tests have to be retaken. Why? Because they want their own tests on their own paperwork.
Very good point.
And when you cross over, you better marry a millionaire when you get there.
How about a millionaire that has
all that stuff? You're a millionaire?
No, how about a millionaire with a spare, a kidney? Yeah. And then we'll just do the whole thing.
But that's not really real.
Yeah.
At least I do want to share that it's not as simple as moving over, because as soon as I told CPMC I was going to Stanford, all of a sudden the phone is ringing. I got a nurse, another nurse. I got all these people wanting to chip in and start doing their job, because I told them I was leaving, but then, and with my good New York arrogant self, I'm leaving anyway. Now, if I'm leaving, I better get the job on the way there, because I gotta get, every test I just took must be repeated. So,
And you bring up a very good point. Tell me your name. Tell me your name.
Vivica.
Vivica. You're bringing up some very good points throughout this program. I know, I'm smart. Been there, done that. You're a hoot. You are a hoot, I will tell you that.
I'm a New Yorker, I can't help it.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. And I'm enjoying your spirit. I know, Linda, you wanted to add, or did you?
We had a very successful member of our organization who attended our January event and cornered me and said, my doctor won't refer me for a transplant. And I said, well, tell me your story. She said, well, I'm on dialysis and my nephrologist will not refer me for transplant. And I said, well, you can self-refer if the hospital will take it, or insist that your doctor write the letter of you first. So she called back about 2 weeks ago to report that she went in for her regular doctor's appointment with her nephrologist, and she said, I want you to write a letter and refer me for my transplant. The nephrologist said, oh, yeah, sure, no problem, I'll do it. She said, no, now.
And you know what? You need to say now. Because mine
She said now, and the nephrologist said, okay, I'll do it, now. I'm waiting. Okay, I'll write the letter. I'm waiting until you fax it off. It was 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and she got that fax off.
Good for her. Oh, I'm going to... Hey, I will tell you though, I didn't do that. I asked for it, and I waited, and I waited, and then I called Mayo. Did you get it? No. And I waited, and I called the office. Back and forth, and finally, 4 weeks went by, and I said, this is, you know what, nutty. So I called back and I said, what's up with that referral that you were going to submit a month ago? Well, I'm sure we did. I said, look a little closer. Anyway, the story goes on, but it finally got there. But I didn't need to wait. And that's really the key of what you're saying, Linda, is you don't necessarily need to wait. Ask them. But you do need, I wasn't sick enough in my nephrologist's eyes. I was not at the top of his list of to-dos.
She was on dialysis.
And this is a woman on dialysis, yes?
I want to go back to something when you get finished. I've heard, I talk with patients who are looking at dialysis.
Can you speak up just a little louder? I won't have to
I talk
repeat.
with patients who are looking at dialysis.
Yes.
A lot of them have told me that there is a change this year. And that change is if you're 72 years or older, you can only be on the list for 3 years, and then you're just off. And I've also heard that from a well-bound establishment.
First of all, you're referring to the new allocation system. We won't get into that right now. If we have time, I have an extra slide. But I don't know about the 72 3-year thing. I do know that age matters, and age is working against us. I do know that. And we have a dear friend that serves on one of our committees. If I have an opportunity, I'll mention that. No. That's a deceased list. So anyway, I want to give you sort of a peek there. So now here's your call. Oh, yes, please.
I wanted to get your answer to a lady that asked the comment on Medicare. Is what she said true?
Well, it's true.
No, I'm not doubting her word. I just wanted to hear it. I'm not doubting your word. You never said whether.
I would never argue with that woman. Everything she says is true and then some. She's going to get me in the parking lot.
In other words, if you go to be evaluated at the center, and you want to be evaluated at another center, you got to pay for that other evaluation.
I'm glad you brought that up, because to tell you the truth, it will vary. What insurance you have, you need to talk to your insurance companies and the transplant centers and tell them, hey, I'm already being evaluated, or I've been evaluated over at Stanford, and now I want to consider being evaluated at your center. What's the protocol? What do I need to be worried about? What do you know about my insurance? So it's going to be different for everybody.
What is Medicare's law?
I don't know Medicare law. I don't speak Medicare law, and I'd be afraid to tell you Medicare law. But I will tell you that Medicare has probably got a stronger or tighter leash on that, even though they stand to benefit. Not all centers will have you repeat all tests, but many do. So what she was talking about is you have to repeat everything. Some centers will say we'll take a majority of your tests. So it really does vary from center to center. So sorry I can't be more specific with you, but your call to action right now is to, let's let's kind of take this dialogue right. Oh, another comment, real quick.
Are you gonna get into how to recruit a donor?
Oh, gee, I didn't have, sure I am, absolutely. Darn, I forgot that part. Here's the new perspective. Step one, you're right on target. Did I send you in the audience and give you a little money to tell me when we're supposed to get to step one? Well, that was good timing. Okay, so we're gonna make the commitment. Even though you don't feel that you're sick enough, or even though you feel you've been ignored, or you're too old, or even though you've been told you can't be referred yet, whatever it is, I'm going to ask you not to be reactive to what you're hearing, but to be proactive and just be insistent. Perhaps I should say more insistent. Be persistently proactive in spite of pushback, because many of us are getting it. And many of us have got pushback. And many of us have been able to push through, find ways to work around, and do it in such a way that you don't get fired by your doctor in the transplant center. Because I've been warned a few times, don't upset the apple cart over there at the transplant center, because you don't want them to have your name on the list. A list of what? You know, this patient is diligent, cares about her life. I don't mind being on that list.
That's right.
Yeah? Okay. Here you go. So find the path beyond the firewall. I think everything we're talking about here is sort of like a firewall. We have to find a path beyond the firewall to get through that firewall and do it in such a way that we're being responsible, accountable, and we're taking action. We're taking action as a person who cares about their life. If your doctor doesn't know how much you care because you're coming in there dragging your feet because you just had dialysis and you're like, oh, doc, life's not great. Oh, they're like, oh, this person's not a transplant candidate. They can't even, they don't have a sense of what they want out of their life. Well, you got me at a bad time, right? This isn't a real good time to ask me what I want to do with my life. But you just like to see a doctor who would listen. That might help. Number two, let your voice be heard. Become your own best advocate. We've talked about this already. I'm underscoring it again. Use your voice. Don't be shy. Here I am, as a professional speaker, traveling the nation and even a little internationally for years and years, and I'd sit down in that room, wait for the nephrologist to come in, and I'd just be shaking in my boots. Seriously, I was. It was like, okay, when's he going to get to that point? Or when's he going to get to that point? Or when's he... Oh, okay, well, should I ask him, what do you think about... Oh, you didn't like that? Oh, okay. Get back to my car. Oh, my life is ruined. Got a death sentence. That's what I felt. I felt I had a death sentence. I was like, snap out of it, Risa. Snap out of it. Take control. Everything else you've done in your life, you wouldn't let someone lead you down a path that wasn't going to lead you to the best outcome. Why are you denying yourself? At first I was frustrated, I must tell you. Because I felt as many of you feel, I felt that I was being denied critical information that can make my life better, that could actually save my life. I felt denied as a patient at the time I needed to hear it, where I could do the most with that information. I felt denied, and I felt it was just very awkward, and it was such a struggle because it was so heavy on my heart as it was. You know, it's easier for me to give information to other people, but when it has to do with you, right? When it's your core being, your health. Use your voice. Do not be shy. 6 disciplines of how you can use your voice. Engage with your doctors and nurses. You can also ask, make sure you're asking questions and sharing your concerns. If your doctor says, this is what you need to do, well, let me tell you why I'm concerned about that. Or tell me why I would need to do that if this is my goal. Why do I need to go to vein mapping if this is my goal? I'm at 29 GFR. Why do I need to do this? Seek to learn as much as you can. Know all your options, the expected outcomes of those options. Understand how choices compare, and have a proactive plan. So, when should you be evaluated for transplant? Well, stage 4, what you normally hear from doctors, or possibly even the transplant center, is you wait till 20 GFR. How many of you have heard that? Wait 20 GFR or lower. Should be in the majority of the room. Can I tell you that I got evaluated at GFR 25? Are you wondering how I did that? If you have to wait to GFR 20, how did that happen? Well, guess what? You don't have to wait for GFR 20 to be evaluated. You certainly can't be GFR 60 or 40 or even in your 30s. But usually when you get about, somewhere in that mid-20 range, I mean, I started doing this at 29, just happened to be at 25 when I finally got that evaluation in. And at Mayo Clinic, in Phoenix, they invited me in for an evaluation. They said, well, we may have to redo some of the tests, and we may not be able to evaluate a donor right now. But yeah, wouldn't you like to know if you're a candidate before you start sharing your story? Before you start inviting people to possibly consider being a potential donor for you? I want it to be aware of that fact. So first thing is insist on the early transplant evaluation, but I got a couple additional slides to your handout here. So that was step 3A. Step 3B is explore transplant center options in whatever location. I mean, some of you may be even thinking Southern California. Some of you may be thinking another state. Again, you need to check with your insurance, check with your transplant centers, and see if some of the evaluation process, those tests, those records could be transferable if insurance is going to have a problem with that. Or you may just get comfortable at one center, but again in California with the long wait. But know your options and know, it's a choice. You can choose your center. Start contemplating potential donors. How many of you have already thought, for you that are pre-transplant right now, hoping to avoid dialysis, how many of you have in your mind some individuals that might possibly volunteer to be a donor for you? Maybe you haven't had the discussion yet, but it's like, gee, I wonder if, maybe you don't even know their blood type, maybe they go through paired, but yeah, that would be 3C, contemplate donors. Yes?
What's the age limit for being a donor?
Again, on the age limit for being a donor, it usually starts, if I'm not mistaken, it's 18, and a transplant center will be the one to bless it. And it usually goes up to 65, but again, it's a number. It's a number, and if they're very healthy. I had a potential donor that was 79, and Mayo said, bring him on. They wanted to see. Yeah, so he was healthy, he was a chiropractor. He wasn't my blood type, so he never did get tested, but they were saying, age is a number to us. We need to know the other health profile. Step 4, start sharing your story. So your question, how are we going to go about asking people, or how do we go about recruiting donors? How does this awkward conversation, I mean, do you like asking people for money? Do you like asking people, for anything really? Kind of, we like to be self-sufficient, right? Even a ride to dialysis, that gets old after a while. No, you're good with it? Vivica's good with it.
Oh, I'm in sales. I'll ask the person for anything. Do you know anyone with a spare kidney?
And I bet you'll find more than most, because it's the shameless big ask, right? The big ask. We call it the big ask. But I'm going to encourage you, rather than asking.
I thought you just called me a big ass.
ASK. Did I tell you I was going to argue with her? Would I call her a big ass? Big not. No. The big ask. Keep with the cake. Yeah, I'll be choking pretty soon. Thank you for clarifying that before I saw you out the parking lot. So Steph, we're going to share our story, and what you're doing as you're sharing your story, here's the magic in all this. If you're not besties, where it comes a little easier, when you have a best friend who's following you all the way. But when you're not besties, sharing your story, and it could be the same thing, instead of, do you know anybody who has a kidney? I used to approach the register at a grocery store. Did you find everything you were looking for? Everything but a kidney. I said, yeah, I'm so excited. I've been approved to have a kidney transplant. And I'm just so thrilled that everything came back with a big green light. But the only thing I need now, minor detail, is a kidney, a living kidney donor. So I get into these conversations with people as a dental assistant while she's taking, radiographs. It would be any time the opportunity presented itself. But typically, it was telling my story, not saying what I was looking for. You can do it. It still helps because it's a way to get into your story. Really, tell me more. Maybe they're just asking, tell me more about this kidney transplant. You want to share your story in such a way that you're educating people, but you are enlightening them to know a little bit more about your situation. For those of you that are contemplating the living kidney donor process and how you would approach, maybe you have some people in mind, Have you really told your story, your true story? Hey, you could even say, hey, I went to the seminar. It was just so fascinating because I really felt like my hands were tied because I'm waiting on this list for 8 years. And it's just overwhelming. And they were talking about living kidney donation. And wow, I mean, my head was just spinning. I was just thinking about, wow, really? I wouldn't have to wait on this list. And I learned about the differences between dialysis and transplant, my quality of life, and the life expectancy, and all these benefits that I don't think I really knew as much before coming in through that door as when I left. And I was just really amazed. And hopefully this person's going, really? That's great. Tell me more. But telling your story in such a way that people are understanding where you are right now and what your future looks like, and how you can apply the details of your story and make it bigger than yourself. This is what I did, and I think you'll appreciate this. Make it bigger than yourself. This isn't just about, hi, this is me, and here's my story, and I need this, and do you happen to have an extra, and let's just talk. Have your guy call my guy. No, it's not like that. This is more about you having an opportunity when somebody says, so how are you doing today? What's going on? What's new since the last time I saw you? What's going on? Well, actually, things are moving along. I feel very blessed. I've been approved for a transplant. I'm on the waiting list, and I've got a couple people that have stepped up to be my donor, but unfortunately, they were disqualified. So I remain helpful. I'm not giving up. But yeah, it would just mean the world to me to be able to have this transplant. And this is going to engage a conversation for people that know you and want to know you and want to know more. So you tell your story and make it bigger than yourself. You say, there's over 100, and I think it's like 107,000 people right now waiting on the list in the United States for a kidney. And the average wait is 5 years. California just happens to be almost double that, right? Literally double. I think at UCLA, I think they were telling me it was 10 years. So yeah, you want to share your story in such a way that you can intrigue someone to say, tell me more. Elicit curiosity, elicit interest, and some story sharing tips. And Jan, I see your hand. Hang on there one quick second. On some story sharing tips, when you share your story, before you just blurt it out, I'm going to ask you to write it out, script it, practice with people, rehearse it, and I'm not wanting you to be mechanical in this. But I'm going to write it out and edit, and write it out and edit, and write it out and edit, and say it to yourself in front of the mirror and go, does it sound like I'm needy? Or does it sound like I'm actually communicating from my heart about my situation if somebody who cared about me really wanted to know what my situation is? Is there a way I can make this educational? Can I share the difference between the choice of being on dialysis or remaining on dialysis or having a transplant, what that would mean to me? Am I educating the general public? Do most people know that they can donate an organ like a kidney while they're still living? Do most people know this? A lot of people think they have to be dead to donate. Huh? A lot of people think they have to be blood related. So we need to educate, but rehearse, script, rehearse, and weave it into the natural course of conversation. Make it educational. Step 5, educate others on the value of living donors. The value of what we had been saying all along, what you're getting in return. Let's just talk about that. Again, most people don't know about LKD, living kidney donation. 12 people are dying every day. Those that are waiting on the list that can wait no longer, you got 12 people dying every day. You don't want to be one of them. That could be part of your story. Oh my goodness, 12 people are dying every day while they're waiting on this list. I'm so lucky. I've been on this list for 8 years. Boy, I think that I really need to start considering this, because I value my life. And if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for the people that are in your life that love you most. They deserve the best of you, right? Because they say, well, it's okay, I can continue this way. They don't have to be dead to donate, we mentioned that, and can live a full life with just one kidney. A lot of potential donors don't realize that. And it's okay to not be blood related or even a mismatch in blood. So speaking of mismatch, I have a little clip of a video, but let me introduce, and I'm going to have her share a little bit of information. We have a special guest in our audience, and let me just grab her card here, Jan Robertson, who is the producer of a movie that some of you may be familiar with. If we had the time today, I would love to show you that movie. or even a clip of it. Perfect Strangers, has anybody heard of it? It was on PBS recently, right? Right? Love it. Jen, stand up just for a moment. I know you had maybe a comment too, but tell us a little bit about your movie.
I mean, I'm just tapping into what Risa is saying here. She and I met on a panel at the American Association of Kidney Patients last September, where I screened the film. There are postcards about it on the table here. But it's actually about an altruistic living donor, non-directed, who decided to donate a kidney because of a conversation that she had with a young woman who she was in a class with at lunch, and the woman said, oh, I have kidney failure, and wasn't looking for a kidney, but because of that, the woman in my film started looking into it, doing research, and ultimately ended up starting a chain at CPMC about 4 years after the seed was planted. And so in the film, it follows her story. It also follows a woman who's on home hemo. So people who are thinking about hemodialysis. I know Kathy, the woman in the film, the dialysis patient, says that very few doctors talk to their patients about home hemo. And for her, it was an excellent option. You know, she could just do it in the convenience of her home. And then it actually ends up, because the kidney was non-directed, the story ends up going, I won't say where, but to a different state where the kidney ends up in a person whose wife donated on his behalf. And so I really want to agree with, first of all, it also demystifies what it means to be a living donor, because now that the film is getting out there, I've gotten feedback, Facebook messages, as has Ellie, the donor, saying, well, this is something I've been sitting on the fence about, something I've been thinking about, and this really just sort of, demystifies the whole thing. So those of you who are looking for donors, I really just want to really support what Risa is saying here, that not only do people need to be educated, but the whole fear thing, needs to be taken away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thanks for being here today. It's a great audience. Yes, did you want to?
I was laying awake last night trying to go to sleep and turn on TV, and HBO had a show called Kidneyville.
Kidneyville.
You heard of that?
No.
I think Bill Mayer produced it.
Oh, no kidding.
It was about Bangladesh. People are going to Bangladesh to get donors.
Right.
People are giving kidneys.
Well, we probably can't enter that topic, but thanks for letting us, medical tourism, transplant tourism. Can't get into that topic during this program, but that is fascinating. And hopefully, none of you, I'm sure there are times where you think, boy, it's easier for people on the other side there to figure this out, but it isn't the legal way, it's not the safe way, and standing before you as a patient, and obviously not a clinician, but it would not be an ideal way to go about this, and it would probably really put up some red flags for your transplant center. I have a clip here that I was planning to show, and we were talking about if you're not a blood type match. You're going to hear from Mark Kim, who's serving on our panel. Why don't you just wave your hand there, Mark, who will tell you a little bit more about his story. But I just wanted, let's just see if we can click into this news piece, because it's such a great, I'm just going to give you a little teaser here of Mark. See if this gets going here. Let's go, let's go. Oh, no audio to the computer all of a sudden? See, our friend hooked up our audio at the last minute. This is not good. You think that would be good? Because he's, no, because you're, oh, that's right, we can do this as a backup, unless he's still around. Matt, sorry about that.
I can hear it, right?
Well, you heard it on my computer.
Yeah.
Now that's strange.
Are these turned up?
Maybe these are not. Yeah, some.
Disappointed dialysis patients waiting for a match goes on and on.
There are 110,000 people or so waiting on the waiting list.
Dr. Stephen Katz-Nelson says the way to get more matches faster is finding more people
Can you hear that
like
at all?
these. Raise your hand if you donated a kidney. Now, I want you to raise your hand if you knew who you were giving your kidney to or who you were getting your kidney from before the surgery. No one, huh? They became a transplant chain. Donors willing to give one of their kidneys to a stranger in order to get a kidney for a loved one.
People involved in these chains are interlinked. It's like a puzzle with all the pieces connected to each other.
Doctors at California Pacific Medical Center want to dispel the myth that family members have to give their kidneys directly to relatives.
Fundamentally, if you're going to give, does it matter where the gift goes?
After Silicon Valley veteran David Jacobs received a kidney transplant 10 years ago at the same hospital, he designed a computer program to help fast-track the donor matching process.
Instead of dying, I lived and was able to build this software and to help other people.
Right under your tongue for me.
Zulie Broussard also wanted to help other people after experiencing a great loss of her own. You've had a difficult time with illness in your family.
Yes, my son had cancer, diagnosed at 17 and passed away at 21. And my husband also had cancer, and his illness was very short, 5 weeks before he was gone.
After their deaths, she decided to donate one of her kidneys to give another family a second chance. Her gift led to the medical chain reaction that ultimately helped 6 people get a new kidney. This week, they got to meet the strangers who saved their lives. The emotional introduction at the hospital shows the power of the transplant chain.
The difference between you and everyone else in this chain is that you didn't have a loved one who was getting a kidney.
But they did. I just want them to have that quality of life. I want their loved ones to know that they're going to be around.
Zulie's kidney went to Oswaldo Padilla, a 26-year-old factory worker. His sister-in-law donated to a 52-year-old dental assistant, and her son offered a kidney to a mother of 5. Then her daughter shared with a 60-year-old grandmother, whose own daughter gave to Mark Kim, while his sister's kidney helped a 47-year-old designer regain his health.
We saved overall about 15 or 16 years total on the waiting list when you look at all those people. Several of those patients, a couple of those patients anyway, might not have made it that long to get to a transplant on the waiting list.
And how does that feel to be sitting next to the person who saved your life?
It's amazing. Just amazing.
Former Marine Liz Torres couldn't donate to her mother Miriam.
What was it like meeting this guy today?
Oh, there's something else. I had no idea who I gave it to till today. He's an amazing guy.
And I'm going to name my kidney Corporal. This is the Corporal in the Marines.
And there you have it, Corporal.
Still Corporal.
Oh, it's still Corporal. Good deal. So, yeah, Zulie, wow, what an angel. Look what she started. Another altruistic, and she lost 2 family members. Her only 2 family members, her husband and her son. And she goes to seek greater purpose, to give life to someone else. I mean, that to me is so moving. And it's individuals, incredible angels that cross our path. And much of what's shared in the movie, this altruistic donor who wants to make a difference in this world. And you think, gosh, you know, I just couldn't imagine having to ask anybody to do this. But typically these are the individuals that seek you out. You're not really asking back to, how do I ask somebody? Individuals that hear your story and know your need, or are seeking people that have your type of need, that have become more educated on this process of giving and saving lives or optimizing remaining years. They will find you if your story is out there. So it's about sharing the story and a hope, why is this not, there we go, advancing, so that you can then move on through this process, and you're not just helping yourself, because by sharing your story, you're educating everyone. Because maybe this altruistic donor heard some stories prior, and then she got to a place in her life where she said, you know what, I can do something now. I can sit here and have a pity party, or I can make the world a better place. And she did that. And I'm in awe, I'm in total awe of that spirit. I didn't know if you were raising your hand, were you? No? I thought, Mark. Okay, so what most people don't know is the wait. That there's over 100,000 people, average 5 years. California wait can be up to 9 to 10 years. This is something people need to know, especially in this area. And the new allocation guidelines changing things. You also, it's important, I think, for all of us to know that deceased donation is not enough. So this is very interesting when you look at these statistics. There's approximately 2.4 million people in the United States that die every year. So 2.4 million deaths in the United States. Of those 2.4 million, 15,000 individuals are consented donors. You think, really? That's all? You know, it's a good amount, but is it enough? No. And then of the 15,000 that are consented, there's only, we at least have 15,000, that's 30,000 kidneys that we can pull from. It doesn't go like that either, because perhaps the cause of death, perhaps that patient's health profile would disqualify them from being a donor, even though they wanted to be a donor. So 5,000 of the 15,000 are qualified donors, only a third. So if, let's just imagine, both kidneys were good in all 5,000. So if you're at 100,000, then you're down to 90,000, it's just not enough. The disparity is still 90,000 a year, and that's why our list just keeps growing. And yes, some people are getting transplanted. There's usually 10,000 of deceased, about 6,000 of living, but the living number is going down. We need to increase education. You need to increase public awareness. Living kidney donors offer more. This is when you're sharing your story. The deceased donor, usually with a deceased donor, you're getting 10 to 12 years of function with a deceased donor, although there are people that can get many more years. But that's statistically what we're seeing. And double that with living kidney donors. Testing and thorough testing, you could certainly do testing when you're in the deceased donation arena, but in the same respect, imagine a living kidney donor. And for those of you that know what living kidney donors go through, that testing is elaborate, and it will, in fact, give you a lot more information and a lot more security to know that the donor is not putting themselves at risk, number one, and number two, that they are an ideal donor for you, and that this surgery is going to be well thought out, and committees are going to meet and say, based on this health profile, and this health profile, and the blood, and whether it's going to be impaired or if it's going to be direct. And waiting for years on dialysis. Got another hand up in the back of the room. Or delisting. And this is what I love. Hold on one sec. I love the fact, and I was able to do that, and others that have had a preemptive, we are able to give someone else our place in line. I was listed. I didn't have to go on to dialysis, but I was listed because I did get to 20 GFR. And you need to get to 20 GFR typically to have the surgery, because that's when insurance companies will bless the surgical event and pay for it. But there could be other things that could cause the center, maybe if you were ever at 20 and now you're sort of hovering 21, 22, you're kind of going back 18, 20, the surgery can be scheduled at most centers. Don't mark my word on that. Did you want to add a comment to that, or are you good?
I had a little story about a donor. I just had a donor for a year now. They told me I had to lose weight because I was 300 and something pounds. Now, so after a year of me trying to lose the weight and her being so excited about donating, they just told her last week, because she's only 5 years in recovery, that she does not qualify. The sad thing was, they could have told her last year.
Yeah.
Blessing is, I lost the weight and I look great. That's a plus, but you know what she had to go through to her whole life, just to be excited about giving this gift, and then she can't do it. But it's okay, because if I'm supposed to be on dialysis, I'll be the best looking, best smelling.
That's right. That's right.
If I get a kidney, by the way, if anyone knows anyone,
I think you have some competition in this room. Enlist volunteers. You don't have to go in alone. Some of you might say, well, this is what I'm going to continue to tell you to do, is to share this story. This is a lot of work, right? So first I'm sharing my story. I'm going to craft the story. I'm going to script it. Then I'm going to rehearse it, and there is an app for that. And I'm going to refine it to such a way that it could still be humanistic, but in such a way that I don't want to share a story, if I'm sharing my story with you, that you feel like it's a plea, and that you would feel guilty if you didn't say, well, let me help you. You can never get an individual into a corner to say, oh my gosh. Or individuals that are pleasers. You have any pleasers in your life? They're great people because they like to please you, right? But they'll say things that they can't follow through on because they don't want to hurt your feelings. Oh, well, I'll help you. Have anybody ever, well, I'll help you. I'll help you. And then what happened to that person said they'll help me? Nobody's helping me. Step 7, find a mentor. What did they achieve and how? So in addition to it takes a village, Find people to help you be your own best advocate, and then spread your wings even further and find people that mentor other people. There are people in this room, there are people that will be serving on the panel that can be mentors to you locally because they've been there, they've walked in your shoes, and they can share what has worked well for them, what's worked best, what went wrong and why, what would they do differently if they had a choice to do it. And where to find a mentor or coach? I said, well, where do you find these people? I mentioned, here in this room at National Kidney Foundation has a peers program. American Transplant Foundation has a mentoring program, all free of charge, by the way. And though there are organizations like the Proactive Path, one of my companies, where in addition to and most people get a heck of a lot out of the book, I will tell you that, because this is mentor in a box. Mentor in a box on the steps of how to get to the finish line of becoming what I call a donor magnet from the book. Expanding your circle of influence. It can't just be you and your little comfort zone. You have to stretch beyond that comfort zone. The outreach that you need to consider, and that's why, as I say, taking a village, encourage people to become part of your advocacy team. Have your husband, your wife, your child, anyone, best friend, be your voice. It's easier for somebody else to share their story about my friend or my husband or my wife. I'm so concerned. Here's the story. This is where this person is right now. And I'd love to be able to donate to that person. If I could, I would, but either I'm not qualified health-wise, I'm not the right blood type, and we're not talking paired perhaps. We're looking perhaps for some direct donation. The center might encourage you to do that whenever you can, so that it can be it can be easier to get to that scheduled date because you're not waiting for the chain to all the I's to be dotted and the T's to be crossed. So how else can you outreach? Email, social media, online chat communities, churches, synagogues, their bulletin boards, talking to your pastors and your rabbis and saying, hey, how can I get my story known? I don't necessarily want to come up and do a plea to the group, but can we do a piece? Can we show Jan's movie at one of our sessions? Can we have a dialogue about living kidney donation, or the number of patients in the United States that are on this waiting list and how many people are dying each day? Can we do something to make a difference, even if it's just more of a spirited awareness? Because trust me, the spirited awareness is going to lead to action. Nothing has to happen at the moment that it's being shared, but that sort of sets into our DNA and trickles in, and it gives us a greater awareness of opportunity. More platforms that you could be sharing, media, radio, TV. Get those interviews going. Call your local stations and say, hey, especially if you see something in the newspaper and say there was a piece on this, and I have a personal story to connect to that. Can I help you deliver that piece with a little bit more humanistic element to it, because I'm local and I have a story. How can I marry the two? Online journals, local fundraisers. Get the MC to talk about your specific story, even though it may be a chronic kidney disease type of group. And campaign cards. How many of you have, those of you that are thinking about looking for a potential donor, do you have a card that has your transplant center contact information, your information or a blurb about your story, your blood type, what center that you're preferring to go to, and maybe a little statement of purpose and some information? So if somebody says, oh, I didn't realize that, and you're in passing, you say, and you don't, it's awkward, like, well, should I give you my phone number? So here's a card. I even have a website that could tell you a little bit more about my story. If you're interested, here, let me give you one of my cards. So it has that information where somebody can circle back your way without you having to ever ask, because they may share your story, and that person shares your story, and then it becomes bigger and grander, and you expand your circle of influence. Step 9, I want you to commit to continuous learning, too. So patient meetings, meeting today, requesting patient education, Q&A with your doctors, getting involved with mentors and books that will help you, lead you to a better outcomes. You don't have to, no one's really shared all the intricacies, of how this process is going to work for you. You're going to get a lot from a number of people. Speaking of patient meetings, in addition to your meeting here, your national presence of AAKP, this is BAAKP, but the national presence is having a convention, and that meeting is in Nashville, September 25th to 27th this year. I want to highly encourage you to get online, register, find out a little bit more about it, and join us in Nashville. Linda serves on the convention committee with me, and we're very excited about the program. So we want to make you aware of these are the types of meetings. I have to tell you, I learned some of my best pearls from attending a polycystic kidney disease foundation convention. Conventions where you have doctors and scientists and social workers and dietitians and patients talking about their experience and meeting the people like you meet at this meeting. It's just an extraordinary experience. So what about things that we should avoid? I told you things you should do. So here are some things I believe you should avoid. Patient conundrum number 1. Now, neglecting to take full ownership of your health. So let's make a pledge right now that if you choose to live your best life possible, that you are going to pledge, you make a personal pledge with yourself, that you are not going to neglect your health. You're going to take ownership, you're going to become more accountable. And how are you going to do that? By, and in your handout, at the end of your handout, you have some forms, I believe. Let's see if they're there. So their pages aren't numbered here, but there's a sheet, a chart that says My Lab Chart. If you are not recording your lab entries each time you have a lab draw, and you can, again, there's an app for this as well. I'm giving you a paper copy. And you can customize the column that has the information in there, but obviously your creatinine and your GFR are going to be 2 key points for you. I want you to be tracking it. That's what you want to bring back into your doctor's office when you're needing the eye-to-eye, and not waiting for your doctor to look through your chart or look on the computer and say, You start that conversation. Blood pressure monitor, there's also another form in your chart, my blood pressure log, and I want you to be looking at you're taking numbers at home, right? But are you recording them? So let's start recording them so that you can bring them into your doctor's office again. Because maybe you're like me, I had white coat syndrome. So my blood pressure was always high when I went to the office. So I had to prove what it was at home. And ironically, I did have high blood pressure. I say ironically because I kid myself. I would breathe and meditate and listen to music and whatever. And I was like, oh, see, my blood pressure is just so perfect. I'm going to document it and tell my doctor I don't have to get on those medications. And what a mistake I made. Because my disease was advancing as my blood pressure was increasing. So get real with it, document it, share it. And a symptom diary, I believe I shared that with you as well. Let's see if we got that in there. My body awareness log. Let's tell our doctors what we're feeling, when we're feeling it, what we were doing at the time, what we do an hour before, an hour later, so that we can diagnose, we can be our own diagnosticians in a sense, by not just saying, my knee hurt me the other day. Oh, that's nice, tell me more. You say, I did this, or I started a new supplement, or I did whatever it was that you did, and then it seemed like the next day or a few hours later, so you're going to give more information to your doctor, and you're going to ask, what do you think that means? What do you think I should do? How can I try to work towards a solution here instead of just sitting here in the dark? Well, I've heard of that before. Well, yeah, well, what should I do about it? Patient conundrum number 2 is neglecting to steer your appointments. Let's get that back here. Neglecting to steer your appointments. And what we mean by that is using your voice to drive, as we mentioned, using your voice to drive your goals, and using your voice to the voiceless. I was the voiceless. I started using my voice for myself. But we can use our voice when we share our story for the voiceless. For those that may be on dialysis or nearing dialysis, and we're just increasing, we're creating this awareness, this general awareness in the universe, if you will, of this opportunity. It is truly an opportunity. If you talk to donors, you will find that there is a magical opportunity in this process. And initiate and direct conversations. So you're with your doctor again, you're going to use your symptom diary, you're going to point out your lab values, you're going to ask direct questions, right? And you're going to underscore your goals and intentions. Patient conundrum number 3, using wishful thinking or denial, the longest river in Egypt, right, as a coping mechanism. I got lots of time, I don't need to deal with this. Right, Phil? You don't need to deal with this. Come on. I'm not going to have to. So you ignore what tomorrow may bring. By not sharing your story now, even if you're years away from transplant, now's the time to start sharing it. If you're on dialysis, now's the time to start sharing it. And if you're hoping to get a transplant before the need for diet, whatever stage you're in, your story is going to motivate and trigger awareness at the very least. And at the very best, you're going to find your donor. Your donor's going to say, I would really like to help you. And there are going to be people say, I'd like to help you. I can't donate a kidney to you, but how else can I help you? Some awkward conversations have come my way through my own personal experience where best friends actually didn't know how to have that conversation, so it never came up. All they wanted me to say was I was fine when they asked me how I was. But that's not what the reality was. And when I'd start to share my story, the subject got changed. What they did for me is give me a gift. And you may not see it that way, but they were not my ideal donor. I needed to go next, some will, some won't, next. They were not the person for me to have this discussion with. And it's not that they're bad people, they didn't care, and they didn't love me, because they do. But they couldn't go there. And I needed to honor that. They would not have been an ideal donor. So just bless them, send them, goodness, and realize that thank you for giving me a feel that this is uncomfortable for you. This is not something that you really want to do. Those that do respond, lean in your direction and say, tell me more, those are the ones that you want to continue to invite the dialogue. Those are the ones that are, if they're not able to possibly be a potential donor for you, they will, by God, by golly, they'll do whatever they can to help you find one by sharing your story. And it's so nice when it comes third party, when someone else is sharing how much they care about you. So don't ignore what tomorrow will bring. Act as if, and of course acting as if everything is fine. We need to forget that. Forget the whole denial bubble that we can get into. And what you don't know won't hurt you. I know Phil's going to talk a little bit about this as we get into the panel here. So it's not a matter of if or when your kidneys will fail. It's a matter of failing to secure your best option while you still have a fighting chance. And even if you're on dialysis for 8 years, you still have a fighting chance. We should never give up. You can't surrender. If the possibility of you potentially having a transplant is real, and potentially finding an ideal donor could become a reality for you, you have to see it, to believe it, and to create it. I'm a big, and I talk about this in the book too, I'm a big supporter of the power of intention. You have to not only want it so bad that you can taste it, but you have to almost act as if it's already happened. And I believe that was my magic ticket. I believe that that's what took me on and catapulted my path to attracting my ideal donor. That's what put me into being a donor magnet. And I'll tell you, my friends, it may seem a little too woo-woo for you, but you might want to roll up your sleeves and kind of lean in that direction and go, how can, it's not just about thinking optimistically, because that's a big part of it, but actually visualizing what your life would be like and act as if it's already there. In those daydreams that you have, see yourself living your best life possible. Believe that it is possible because it's already happened. Patient conundrum number 4. Okay, I got a donor lined up. I hear this from a lot of my mentees. Got a donor lined up. Don't need to worry about any more donors. People are, how you doing? Oh, I got a donor. I'm great. Yeah. They're being tested or they just got approved. But things can change up to the time that you're being rolled in for surgery. Your donor has the right to change their mind, and they can, and they're encouraged to. The transplant center actually encourages you. Now, you sure you want to do this? Like, hey, I really do love my friend. Yes, I want to do this. Yeah, it's kind of makes you a little uncomfortable, but we have to make sure that the potential donor does not feel coerced. The transplant center has to document that there's no coercion going on. And that they didn't feel pressured, or they didn't say, well, yeah, I'll do it because I was the only one, and she was really needing to have this transplant. It can't be about that. This is because I feel this is the right thing to do. It's the thing I want to do. It's the thing that is going to make this process, for me, I'm going to get something out of it. This is always what overwhelms me about donors. That they actually get something out of this. I had to knock myself over the head I don't know how many times. Because you will find that even though you think you have donors lined up, or several donors lined up, there are a number of misunderstandings, unexpected surprises, and heart-wrenching disappointments. I am here to tell you, I had 5 individuals tested over the course of a year and a half. All 3 were fully tested. The 4th was partially tested and then thought, I don't like the way the transplant centers are treating me. So I think I'm going to just step aside. And this is, again, over a period of time. The 5th one no-showed to testing. Thank God, what a gift. I was a little upset. I was kind of hurt and devastated. And I thought, thank you. What a blessing that you didn't show up for testing. You imagine not showing up for surgery?
Yeah.
These are blessings. So every little hiccup and bump, and anytime you hit the wall and go, oh, I just can't do this. I can't do this another day. I can't do another day on dialysis. I can't tell my story one more time. Oh, I can't deal with this non-response, or my family not even feeling it, my family supporting me. I mean, across the board, I can tell you, I've probably heard pretty much all of them. And they're real. And it's just the human dynamics of people not knowing how to flow with what's going on in your life right now. And you just think, oh, I think this is not the person I want to spend a lot of energy with helping me do my story. I need somebody who's going to be my cheerleader and help me become a donor magnet. Yeah, so a lot of disappointments. And I love this one. You know, I really wanted to give you one of my kidneys, but after discussing this with my family, my boss, my girlfriend's mother, my boyfriend's dog, I discovered my daughter-in-law's twice-removed second cousin thinks she might need a kidney someday. But that's how crazy some of these things turn out. And what I say today, say I wanted to be a donor. Vivica, I'm going to give you one of my... I'm going to give you one of my kidneys, except I only have one. But if I did have a spare, and I said I want to give you one of my kidneys, because you're going on your story, and I'm like, yeah, right, yes, I'm going to give you one of my kidneys. And then I go home and I talk to my husband. He goes, are you nuts? Right. Oh, she's from New York, I got to give her my kidney. No, I mean, this is real life stuff. I've always told my potential kidneys, well, they were, I guess, potential kidneys, right? My potential kidney donors, you go home, you talk with your husband, your wife, your kids, your best friend, because people think you're crazy, especially if you're altruistic, if you're non-directed. Are you nuts? Do you have not enough going on in your, are you lacking something? Well, maybe I'm looking for a higher purpose. Maybe I'm looking to achieve something that is so great it's hard to even put into words. It's the most heroic human experience imaginable. You take firemen, you take police, you take, you know, here's a fireman running into a burning building. You've got a paid fireman and you've got a volunteer fireman rather. They both run into the burning building. They both go to save individuals. They both risk their lives. One gets paid, one doesn't. Who's more heroic? So this whole issue of compensation, which we don't have time to get into right now, but there's a whole conversation of, you know, should donors really go out of pocket to do this? And why we have old legislation, 1984, these rulings that say there could be no dollars across the table, no financial incentive for donors, but they have to take time off work, they lose wages, they may have to travel, and there are some opportunities where we can at least reimburse them for some of those costs. You have to be very, very careful. And any of that dialogue before transplant can really cause you a problem. But yeah, people can say, I'll do this for you, and then you think you've got it nailed, and you get surprised. So even though you might have one confirmed, two confirmed, whatever, you just always keep, because if that person isn't needed for you, guess what? They can find somebody else in need. They can go join a chain and be part of a chain. The patient conundrum number 5 is not to expect everything to come from your doctor's office. You don't, because you're showing up to these meetings, right? So you're not expecting everything from your doctor's office. So make sure that you're looking at resources, articles, mentors, as we mentioned, books, websites, resources. Expand that. My story, I told you about the 5 donors, right? So we had, the 6th was the unexpected donor. I had my unexpected, I'm going to share just a little blurb on that, and we're going to get close to breaking into panel here.
fact, it's one of the most common life-threatening genetic diseases. Since there is no treatment or cure, the only two options are dialysis or transplant. I had my aha moment when I discovered the difference between dialysis and transplant, above and beyond just the inconvenience of dialysis, but the quality of life benefits of transplant and preemptive transplant and getting a transplant from a living donor. It made all the difference in the world for me in terms of what path I wanted to take.
Whether you're a living donor or become a deceased donor, I'm very passionate about it because of being a nurse and seeing all of the good and positive stories that come from organ donation.
Melissa Blevins runs the solid organ transplant unit at Mayo Clinic in Phoenix, Arizona. Every day she hears about people who die because no donor organs were available. And the day she saw 2 little children die for that reason, her life changed forever.
Turned a corner for me, and I thought, you know, we've just got to do more. I've got to do more.
I just feel so grateful that I was able, through this gift, to bypass the need to be on dialysis. Most people are on dialysis first, and because they're waiting. There's an average of 5 years on the waiting list to get a kidney from a deceased donor. And Melissa's gift allowed me to give someone else my place in line. Most people can't survive 5 years waiting for a deceased donor.
It occurred to me, okay, well, I'm not really walking the talk here. And so it was really an opportunity to walk the talk. And then I met Risa, and we just clicked, and it was as if all of my intention funneled into that one encounter.
We felt a kindred spirit when we first met. We didn't realize that the lab results would tell us that we're not only kindred spirits, but we are sister-like in HLA matching. So that was pretty amazing. It was the last thing that I ever expected, and yet when she had offered, that missing piece of the puzzle just slipped into place.
It was surprising to me, the highlight of my life so far. I knew it would be great, but I didn't know how great. But I think that's part of the emotional magnitude of the event.
I don't know if I can even put it into words. I'm just overwhelmed by her spirit, her selflessness, her desire to not only be passionate about the value of living donation, but to be walking the talk.
Let me just pause this here. You know, this is an incredible story, as all of us have incredible stories here. Those of us that are transplant recipients, about our donor. Melissa was, at the time, the administrator of transplant at Mayo Clinic. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that the administrator of transplant, a woman I had not known, would be my donor. Do you think she had a few people to select from? Do you think that maybe the transplant center would say, well, no, you can't go about it this way? I actually asked, we're talking about being proactive and self-advocate and speaking up, and when Linda, you're telling a story, no, you fax it right now, you send it right now. What happened is I was hearing back from my potential donors, so saying, you know, I called the donor desk, I never got a call back. I called the donor desk, they said they don't need me, you have somebody else in the hopper. I'm like, oh my gosh, do you know how hard it was for me to get this person to call? And now they're told they're not needed? So there were some interesting things that were coming up, and so I very politely asked to speak to somebody higher up. I talked to a manager on the phone, and I sensed that we weren't really on the same page. I think there was maybe a little protectiveness in her voice to make sure that the center didn't do anything wrong. I don't know that they did something wrong, but I will tell you, those of us who have received the gift, that if a donor is calling to say, or even offering to do anything for you, I mean, you are so grateful that the thought even crossed their mind. I had over 200 200, excuse me, I'm getting crazy with my numbers right now. Over 24 people offered to help me in one way, shape, or form. And the intention of saying, what can I do to help you? Could I possibly be tested? Some of them will just say, what can I do to help you? And they wouldn't get to the test part. But those that said, hey, I might be able to do that for you. You are moved to no end when someone, even just in thought and speech, leans in your direction that way. It warms your heart like you cannot imagine. So imagine those people say, oh, hey, yeah, you can call over to the donor desk and they'll get you information about the process. And when you're not even called back, so I thought, you know what? I don't know if this is going to help me, but I'm taking one for the team. Because all those behind me, if they're handling their potential donors that way, we're in trouble. So my goal was just to have a conversation with somebody higher up to say, help me understand the protocol when a potential donor calls into the center. I've had some feedback, and I'm educating other kidney patients, and I'd like to know the protocol. Because honestly, I sense that we might, something might be lacking here in a connection of communication. And she took copious notes. We met 3 times over the course of, it ended up being about 6 months since the day I met her. And it was the 3rd time that we got together, and she asked me how I was doing with my potential donors, and I said, not great. I've had 5 people already step up, and all have been disqualified or no-showed. And she said, yeah, I've been thinking long and hard about this. I've decided I'm going to give you one of my kidneys. I mean, I will also tell you, though, this power of intention thing, it kind of gives me, as J-Lo says, the goosies, if you watch American Idol. It's really pretty amazing stuff. If you really want this that badly, if you're really seeking to live your best life possible, you need to believe in the dream. And you need to attract that energy your way by doing all the right things for all the right people. Because I was trying to get information, not really to save me, but to know what that's like so that I could help other people down the line. So it's really up to you, my friends. It's up to you on this journey. You're on this journey. You have information right now, at least encouraging you to start sharing your story and scripting your story. In the book, I have many scripts and examples and tips of how to word it, whether you're posting something, sending an email. I've also got interviews with living kidney donors as well as recipients. And as we started the program, let me circle back to being lucky. I never felt lucky. Some of you may not think that you're very lucky at this moment. And it is not about luck. It's about preparation meeting opportunity. It's about you being prepared in your mind, heart, and spirit. You having a plan, you sticking to that plan, you sticking to the plan where you're going to stand up and use your voice to advocate on behalf of yourself and behalf of all those beside you and behind you. You can choose to be the master, you can choose to be the puppet. It's your choice. And speaking of choices, I hope you choose to pledge to do something, one thing, every single day. If you could just pledge that, say, I don't know how I'm going to move forward from this program, but if I can pledge to myself, I'm going to do one thing every day to start sharing my story, to start getting that message, or talk to my doctor, get that referral in, or interview some transplant centers. Do one thing every day to advance your process so you can get that much closer to the finish line. We're going to bring our panel up. I don't want anybody to go anywhere, but I'm going to, as they bring their chairs maybe around for a second, I'm going to give you a little anywhere. All right, so back to our panel. And the first thing that I'd like to do, since we're talking about corporals, kidney here, I think that, let's make sure that we've got these. Let's talk a little bit about, if you don't mind me starting with you, Mark, let's talk a little bit about, since they got a little piece of your clip there, tell us a little bit about your experience in terms of being on dialysis before and how you got involved in this paired program. This is Mark Kim, who is on dialysis. It was in the chain that you saw up here on the screen. And I want him to enlighten us with some of his stories so we can get a better feel for that.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. My journey started, let's see, in March of 2013. I didn't have all the time you talked about with GFR. I mean, my nephrologist said, I think you should go sign up to get on the transplant list. Your creatinine is looking good. And I did that. and this was April 2013, mid-April. I went to CPMC and signed up to be on the list.
No, we can't hear out here.
I'm sorry?
There you go. There you
Is that
go.
better?
Yeah.
Anyway, here's some more of my story. I signed up at CPMC to get on the transplant list in mid-April 2013. I went to their 4-hour class to be on the transplant list. 2 weeks later, my kidneys failed.
Wow.
Okay, May 1st, a little bit more than 2 years ago, I had to go get a blood transfusion and then was immediately put on dialysis. So I was on dialysis a total of 22 months. I was in a broken chain in December 2013. Okay, the chain, it wasn't as big as the one I finally was in this past March, but the chain broke, and that's real discouraging. Your emotions go from up here to down here, just like that. Let's see, March 6th of this year, I was in a 12-person chain. You saw part of it. I'm grateful to Zuli Broussard, the altruistic donor, and my sister, who was my living donor. Friday was 10 weeks out, and I'm doing great.
Yay! How about that? 10 weeks. Crazy.
Yeah.
So if you are feeling right now, can you compare life on dialysis to how you're feeling right now?
It's like someone turned the lights on. Okay, I was in the dark for 22 months. And in fact, I was at a party last night, and people go, man, I just cannot believe how much better you look, the energy you have, and even my wit.
Your wit?
Yeah. I was talking to a bunch of guys last night, and they said it's incredible. And just how much better. I never thought that when I was on dialysis. I know I had started on days dialysis, and I just totally washed out. I know those of you that are on dialysis or know what that feeling is, where hey, putting your socks and tying your shoes every day, that's all you can do, because you're just so tired. I did nocturnal dialysis after the summer of 2013 for about 15 of the 22 months I was on dialysis. The longer period helped. It was slower, it was gentler on my heart. I never really felt my heart, but I knew I was tired all the time. And then, like Risa said, be your own advocate. I started in January of 2015 calling CPMC going, hey, what's up you guys? I haven't heard from you, what's going on? And actually I got to the director of medicine. You saw Dr. Katz Nelson up there? He personally called me and said, hey, I was a blood type O, my living donor was blood type A, and supposedly the hardest pair match to make. And he said, normally that takes 2 to 3 years for us to match that. Because I really think, and he must have known that they had this software working. He goes, I think I can transplant you in 6 months. And 2 months later, I got a transplant. So, I'm here. If you guys want to ask any questions, please feel free. Okay?
Let me pass that over, if you don't mind. I know I told you. I'm going to go over to Phil, if you don't mind. I know you're going to stand up, because you've got that great voice and presence. Phil, when I was talking about, because I had a chance to chat up with our panelists before the meeting, about a week or two before the meeting, and what I was so impressed with Phil, I'm calling him Dr. Phil, because he says it like it is. And what I was so impressed is that you were able to see now, afterwards, how much in denial you were before, and how easy it is to say, not me. And please share that part of your story, because I think we all need to hear that. We can benefit.
Well, being in denial is something that we all don't want to be. Well, when I was first diagnosed about potential kidney problems, I decided I wasn't going to do it. And I had high blood pressure, so I was doing a lot of athletic stuff, and so I just eventually stopped taking my medication because I was feeling great. And I was still in denial. I didn't want to do it. And the reason why I didn't want to do it, I worked in a pharmacy. I worked in a pharmacy 30 years, and I see dialysis patients come in all the time, and I hear the complaints and see how their body changes, how their life changes, and I just knew that that wasn't going to be me. So I decided to say no. And then as time passed, I got weaker and weaker, and so I ended up in the emergency room, and then the next day I had a catheter put in my chest, and 2 days later I was doing dialysis. So it was a hard road. I did hemodialysis for 3 years, and then I switched to peritoneal dialysis so I could have a better quality of life and do some traveling. But I was still at that point where I was depressed, and people would ask me, well, I'll give you a kidney, I'll give you a kidney, but I didn't want their kidney. I just figured I would get better by doing peritoneal dialysis, knowing that I wouldn't, but I still wanted to try it on my own. And I was still being depressed about being dialysis. I was embarrassed about being on dialysis. I didn't tell anybody, and I threatened my wife to don't tell anybody. But it didn't work out that way. So we eventually had to get family support, and my wife was a very big supporter of mine. She was there. I yelled at her a lot. She just took into consideration I was sick. So as time progressed, I joined the BAKP, and we were having, by the way, I'm the chairperson for support groups here at Poplar Clinic and at Alta Bates Hospital.
Yay!
And so I was advocating for everybody else. People would call me and tell me, I'm doing this, and how do I get Medicare A and D? How did you get through this? And I was like, oh, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. And so one day I was at home and I said, I'm advocating for everybody else, but not myself. And so I thought about the times that I didn't get a kidney, because when I first started doing dialysis, I had caught carcinoid cancer in the stomach. And so after I had my cancer removed, I went back to my dialysis center and says, okay, I want to be ready to go. She tells me, because you had cancer, you have to wait 3 more years. So that was depressing, but I said, okay, I'll wait 3 years. And the 3 years was a long time, but it came quickly. So after 3 years went by, I went back to my doctor and back to the center, UCSF, and told them, okay, let's do this again. So then he said, okay, we'll go back to the testing. Then I got a stomach ulcer, a bleeding ulcer actually, and so then I was off for another 6 more months, deactivated off the list. And then time went by, and then I was at my center for a checkup, and the nurse says, well, you need to have what do you call it? Can't even think of it. But I have a shot for shingles. And little did I know that you're not supposed to have that shot when you're on dialysis. So I had it, and I just mentioned it to her. She said, oh, no, you know what you're doing? So another 3 weeks went by before I could get back on the eligibility list. And so the final straw came in August of 2013. I called UCSF to my nurse practitioner, and I said, look, it's time to go. What do I have to do? Keep in contact with us. We'll get you we know how you are, we know how you've been, what you've been through. We're trying to work it through. So I waited 2 weeks, and I called back. And she says, well, you know what, I'm moving. I'm quitting my job, and I'm going to Los Angeles, and you're going to have another nurse practitioner. So I said, okay. I said, so where does that leave me? I guarantee you this other person will be ready in 2 weeks. You'll be the first one she calls. So we got ready to hang up, and I says, Shirley, what is your boss's number? Oh, okay. And I said, she gave me the name and the number, and then I said, so what is his boss's number? And she said, what do you need that for? I said, well, I'm going to talk to somebody because you're not doing it for me. So she gave me both the numbers, but the next day before I could call anybody, Dr. Roberts called me and apologized. And I said, well, I've been doing this. We're going circle and circle and circle. And this was in August. And so it just so happens that Thanksgiving night at 1 o'clock in the morning, they called me and said, Phil, come on down, we have a kidney for you. This was on Thanksgiving Day. And when I was getting prepped, this surgeon came in, he said, so I'm going to be your surgeon. And we were talking about the process and all that stuff. And then Dr. Roberts came in and says, no, I'm going to do this one. I don't want him coming back here. So it's been 3 years now that I've had a new kidney. I'm doing well. I'm back to playing sports. Back to doing what I normally do with my family. But one thing I want to stress, though, that those of us that are, or those of you that have been waiting for a kidney, there is hope. You just have to advocate and you have to push yourself. It's depressing sometimes. It's loneliness. It's very, very lonely. But we're all family because we have a common cause together. I never would imagine in a million years that I would be in this situation. When I was 17 years old, I had a job at Stanford working in the morgue. And so I really liked that kind of medicine and the biology and stuff like that. I was always interested in. So I worked with Dr. Shumway, and he did the first heart transplant. And there was a doctor that was working with us, Dr. Coleman, not Dr. Coleman, Dr. Feldman. And I met him when I was a teenager. And then when I first was told that I had kidney problems, they assigned me a doctor, and it was Dr. Feldman. But we didn't recognize each other right away. And then I started bringing up some stuff about that we used to do in the lab. And he's like, oh yeah, I remember you. You're the guy with that big hair. Nothing else, but just the guy with the big hair. So, you know, I just wanted to say that there is hope. It's a challenge, you know. And when you do get your kidney, though, for everybody, I want you to do one thing. I want you to go apologize to everybody that you made mad. You do. You don't think that you are, but you're making something. The way you snap at people just comes natural. You know, turn it down. You know, stuff like that. You know. But it's a wonderful thing to have a new kidney. I'm blessed, and I'm glad I have a new kidney, and I'm very happy that I'm with this organization to share my experiences and to help people and to guide people into pushing themselves to get this kidney and to maintain. And also those who are here that supporting their spouses or their friends or their loved ones, thank you, because it's very hard and it's very appreciated. So thank you very much for listening to my story.
Absolutely. So before we move over to Deborah, I will just say a couple quick things because I had the opportunity, pleasure to speak with her while we were talking about this panel and gathering information, and I was very, very moved by her story. You will be too. She's going to tell you not only about her story, but about obviously her living kidney donor, who is sitting right next to her, Michelle, her angel, and these guys are friends for 40 years, I think now, 40-year besties.
We were diapers.
40-year besties, and it just tells you that, you know, yeah, you don't need to be related, you don't need. You think the wild cures, I had, you know, the administrator of Mayo, but sometimes it is your very best friend that becomes your angel. So please, Deborah, tell us more.
Well, I guess my story started because my father had kidney disease, and my sister and I got tested to be a donor for him, and that's when we discovered that our kidneys weren't 100%. So Michelle and I were already friends, so she's been my friend watching my dad, and as my numbers went down and that kind of stuff.
And you know, tell me, when I wanted to ask you, I know we were talking on the phone, at what point, because you know, we share some similarities that we were watching my father decline from kidney disease. But what's interesting is I believe the point of when we wake up and recognize when we have to start getting more serious about the situation, when do you think it actually occurred to you that you need to start getting a little bit more seriously? Because did you not say that Michelle was saying, how can I help? And you're like, oh.
Yeah,
so
I didn't take Michelle seriously, really, all the years when she'd say, you know, well,
let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, I kept her informed about my situation. I was very lucky. I had a doctor that when my GFR reached 20%, she had me get on the list. So I actually was on the waiting list for 7 years. I went inactive during part of that time because I was feeling good. My numbers would go up and down, so I would pop up over 20%. Michelle knew all this, and we didn't really get serious about it until about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And my function had dropped down below 20, had stayed below 20 for a while. I was not feeling as well, but I still was a little bit in denial because I didn't want to do a transplant until I had to do a transplant. I didn't want to do dialysis. You know, my sister's on dialysis. She's doing peritoneal. That was another thing that was happening 2 years ago is my sister started peritoneal dialysis. So that was a slap in the face to me that, all right, this is inevitable. You know, you want to think that, okay, you're going to be able to keep maintaining. And we had taken a trip to Arizona and had talked about it on there, and while we were down there, Michelle said, well, what's the first step? And so we filled out the online form. She says there was a little few margaritas involved.
Probably don't want to share that with margaritas.
You know, just to see if she would be a match.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, and actually, you know, I guess the question I get asked most often is accepting it. And I was telling Michelle last night, the hardest part for me was accepting the gift from her.
Exactly.
And I'm still in awe of that gift. And, you know, when we have a bond, I didn't realize that other people named their kidneys. Mine's Harvey. So I didn't learn that till today. Actually, Michelle named Harvey.
Okay, and how'd you come up with Harvey? What does that all mean? Okay, we'll pass it on to Michelle.
Well, we started down this journey, and we, you know, took each step first online, and then going in for the initial blood testing. And yes, we were a match. I'm O positive. Deborah's an A. It worked that way. And each step was another journey and another gift or jewel in this. So I kind of ended up feeling like I detached from them at some point, and I was just carrying it for her. So I just named him Harvey. And Harvey was going to go live elsewhere in October, you know, and that's just kind of how it came about that Harvey got named Harvey. And as you were saying, as a donor, it is such an incredible opportunity and a gift to myself to be able to do this for somebody that you love so dearly and such a part of your life and a friend. I mean, for us to be able to do that, how many people get to do that for somebody that they love and care about? I was just tickled to be able to have the opportunity and feel so blessed to be able to. And she's been a very, very good friend, obviously.
Not as good as she is.
Yeah, but it's I can't tell you, it's been the most incredible, positive, blessed, great thing that has happened. And it's just for us, it was a very smooth journey. There wasn't any hiccups along the way. Each step went. The only time was she said, because you have to go through an extensive psychological evaluation, and she said, you know, if you don't pass that, and you pass everything else, I'm not going to be very happy. So, I mean, there was a lot of support, and all along the way, there was a lot of caring for each other, families, you know, obviously families knew each other. And I had talked to my, I have children, grown children, family, and I had talked to them years earlier and kind of prepared them and kind of said, this is really happening. Because at first they go, yeah, Mom, sure, you're gonna, that's what's happening. Yeah. And it's long, each step along the way, I said, this is really happening. So you need to come forth if you have any issues or questions, or there's something that you are concerned about. And when my children did say, really, are you sure this is what you want to do? My mother had some concerns because I'm a little girl, right? And so there was a lot of talking and a lot of sharing and understanding, and it's been a process, and it's been a very positive one for everybody involved.
You're reminding me, if you allow me to interject here, a couple things. Deborah, you had mentioned, hey, I didn't want to have this done until I absolutely had to have it done. Deborah was very, very blessed, for many reasons, to have Michelle in her life. Because you could have somebody who, like myself, had a potential donor, was ready to go, said, let's do it, let's do it. Well, my GFR wasn't where it needed to be even to get evaluated, let alone have a transplant. I'm like, we gotta wait a little longer, gotta wait a little longer. And by the time I did need a transplant, that person all of a sudden could not do it because of various reasons. Different financial state, job change, it wasn't going to work. It was really exciting when he wanted to do it, so you have to be very, very careful. Now, you guys were, you know, being besties, it kind of helps. I mean, you're talking to that person every day. But in the same respect, maybe you get sick, maybe you have no crystal ball of what that outcome is going to be. So I'm going to encourage you, for those of you that, if you are listed, and just piggybacking on what you were saying, Deborah, hey, I just didn't want to do it until I absolutely had to. There are variables in that. You were very lucky, and you had the best possible donor you could imagine, right? Because this person was connected to your hip. She was your surrogate mother for your kidney. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So I caution you that when you do get offers, that know that hopefully you will get several people that will lean in your direction, and you want to guide them all to the center. You want them all to start doing some inquiry, talking to their family, but things can change, and so that's why I don't need to say, hey, I don't need to do any more work now. We can get through this process on our own. Expand your opportunities, because that individual or those individuals that aren't needed for you might be able to help someone else, or join a chain and help several people. Did you want to add anything?
Did you want to say that? Okay. Yes, I mean, when I went in to meet with them, with the doctors and the nurses all along the process, for me, they did bring up the idea of an exchange. And Deborah and I had already kind of talked about it previously, and for us, this was a very intimate, private, but it was a very intimate thing for us. And for us, we knew that wasn't what we wanted to do. And she didn't necessarily want to go down that road either. She'd rather have done a deceased at that time if we didn't work or if she wasn't somebody. So it can be for everybody. Like for Mark, he did the exchange, and it worked out really well with the 6-way, and it was wonderful. So it's a very individualistic thing, and I think we ought to respect and embrace that and be true to what works for you, and not feel bad if that's not what you want to do, or that's not something you're comfortable, or your donor isn't, and they want to give directly to you, or they're willing to do the exchange. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. And if anybody has any questions, or they have a potential donor that may have questions, I'd love to. Please.
Well, first I want to share some information with the gentleman, with everyone, about an organization that helps you with medical questions, and it's called HICAP. It's health.
Oh, okay. It's called HICAP. It's Health Insurance Counseling Advocacy Program. And the one I went to is located in Oakland, and they sit down with you and they help you look at your medical and what you might be eligible for and what you may not be eligible for. And their phone number is 510-839-0393. 510-839-0393, and it's called HICAP. They are also a legal services for senior, but it's HICAP stands for Health Insurance Counseling Advocacy Program.
Thank you.
The other thing is I got a kidney transplant on June 9th of last year.
Yeah. Hey!
My kidney's name is K-Baby.
What was your?
K-Baby.
K-Baby.
K-Baby. I don't know who my donor was, but I want to cry every time I think about it, because when you get that call, you go through sadness for the family, sadness for the person that lost their life, happy that you got a kidney, and happy, you just in 1 second. But one of the questions I want to ask the people on the panel is this. I get my lab work, and I call the California Pacific Medical, and I say, okay, I got my lab work, what does this mean and what does that mean? Right now I have 2 kidney stones in my new kidney, and they aren't bothered by it, really, and some other things. And so I'm wondering, when you all get your labs, first I'm thinking, how do they know that the problems that I'm having is not related to my kidney? I mean, do they talk to other people about, okay, this problem is related to the kidney, I'm having these pains, I'm having this fatigue, and I mean, just how do they know whether it's related to this transplant? And then when you get your labs, what do you do if you see something that's high or low? What do you say to them? What do you do?
Well, I'll tell you, are you still with CPMC?
Yes.
And are you still seeing the doctor regularly?
Yes.
I mean, I just went in April 22nd, for my second appointment, because my transplant was March 6th, and I took my labs with me because I have my lab center send me the labs right to my home, and I said, Doc, what should I be looking at, right? There's 25, 30 different things they test for. So, you know, he went over them with me and said, these are the 5 things you really need to look at, you know, and he wrote them all down for me, and you know, I can't remember, but the one, he said, hey, look, you only have 1 kidney, right? A normal person has 2, so their function's better, okay? So, you know, he brought tips up like that. I can tell you right now, I'm 10 weeks out. I mean, they've already called and have lowered my Prograf, right? In fact, they just did it Friday. You know, every time they see something, they call me. I mean, I don't know who your nurse coordinator is. It's CPMC, but you know, I see Dr. I see Dr. Bohannon and Dr. Petty, and they're really good.
Yes.
So encourage you, just to ask them questions like Risa had advised.
Yeah, and Mark, you're bringing up a really good point. If we go back to the handout in the lab chart, and you get someone you trust, and it really is a trust level. For myself, I mean, when I get my labs, I'm emailing my nephrologist. I'm saying, okay, I'm seeing a difference here. It's usually Prograf level, and I'm bringing it to their attention. So you see something that's concerning you, you bring it to their attention, and if you're not getting the right answer from the first person you're asking, then go to another person, ask the transplant coordinators, or if they're not in that day, talk to one of their colleagues. You'd be surprised how much you can learn. I'm going to need to move on to a couple of questions. I know there's some wrap up with our program that your officials need to make.
I have one suggestion too. Have you started seeing your local nephrologist yet?
Yes.
I would go to them.
Yes, I did.
What I'm finding is that as I've now hitting the 7-month mark, UCSF seems less concerned with me than at the beginning. So I think the care starts going to your local nephrologist.
Okay.
So that's what I would
Very
recommend.
good point. Very good point. Did you have your hand up? You were so patiently waiting.
I was going to ask Melissa. Just heard Deborah say 7 months out.
You mean Michelle?
Michelle,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I got Melissa.
Michelle, about your recovery. I mean, I heard about how wonderful and generous you were about all that.
What was your
Tell us
recovery?
a little bit about recovery.
My recovery went really pretty well. I was able to take a good 6 weeks to 2 months off, more or less. My employer was incredibly supportive. And by the way, California does have a new donor law that employers legally, now it's always tricky because you don't want to piss off your employer doing that, but they are legally, for a kidney donor, supposed to pay a donor for, I think it is 6 weeks, it may be only 4 weeks of regular pay if they donate, and I forget, it's something else or something else. But I didn't bring that up. Like I said, that's kind of a touchy. You don't want to go to your employer and say that. So back to recovery, I really basically I do hike an awful lot, and I did my first hike at 3 weeks out in Arizona.
Wow, great.
And not real high. I did have, the only really problem that I did have, and I was not aware of, I did have some bleeding, not extensive, lengthy. It went on for about 3 to 4 weeks after the 2-week period, and I wasn't prepared for that because you get glued together and you have no bandages. You have a bandage, but basically there is no changing, no bleeding, there's not supposed to be anything. So I was a little tired. I was a little burnt out with that by about 3 or 4 weeks out, and I wish they at least had told me that could have been a possibility. I am the type that I would like to be prepared for all the potentials. Don't want to look for the problems, but I want to be prepared to know what to kind of expect and what may happen, even if it doesn't. I still get a little bit tired at the end of the week after a 40-plus work week, but that could just be the age too. So, but beyond that, I'm 100% back to my full life, and I can't tell any difference. I kept wondering if I would feel something missing or feel something shifting around or that. The location, there's still some, no tenderness. Actually, there's some area that doesn't still have any feeling at all.
Oh.
So, but beyond that, everything's great.
Well, we think you're at 100%, don't we? Let's applaud our panel and just some motivational stories. I know we could be here much longer. I wish we had more time to engage longer. There may be some additional questions. I think we'll if we can, most of us will kind of hang out for those additional questions. But I really would like to honor them for stepping up, for sharing their personal story, for making it more believable that this can happen. And as I shared with you earlier as we began the program, throughout the program, I want to close the program on this is now in your hands. You can get back behind the wheel. You can take charge and ownership for your health because you do value the quality of your life. Listen to the stories. I hope you remember some of the information and those pearls as you walk out this door, because you can truly make a difference. You can connect this, you can become your own donor magnet, and you can call your healthcare professionals. You can collaborate with them as you call them to action. That you can collaborate on a path that is a win-win and that you feel that your voice is being heard. So I thank you all for being here. Don't leave, because we have additional announcements and we want to recognize a very, very special person. So let me hand this back over to you. Do you have a mic or do you have a mic?
Yes. Thank you. All right, so to the panel members who are